Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Christensen, and I am a practicing astrologer since 2013. And today I want to talk about Eros and Psyche. And I was prompted by this through watching Anna from Soul Embrace Tarot. Thank you. You actually inspired me to do this video. And I kind of been in a slump this last month, a month and a half, and low energy, and I was looking for anything to inspire me. And of course, Bridgerton came out season 3, and then finally I had something to get excited about, just in the imagination of Regency era costumes and drama story from Netflix. And I kind of watched back in 2020. That's when it got started because of the pandemic. Normally I would have I love period drama a little bit, but I like a lot of different films. But I love to look at the archetypes that are at play in any given moment or in any kind of piece that the collective picks up on. So while I was watching Anna do her readings, because she was having fun, thank you, Anna. Your laughter and your fun with it has really inspired me. So I wanted to take a moment and do the astrology, and it was more in a moment. It's been actually a couple weeks now. I shouldn't say a couple weeks. It's been about a week and a half since the second part 2. But I really got bit by the Psyche. Now they had it in the season 3. That was kind of the theme of Eros and Psyche, in that the drama of Eros and Psyche and the love. But I think I was inspired to look at the kind of the astrology, because I don't think the collective really dives into this as much as just, oh, it was part of the storyline. Yeah. But I think it gets picked up in the actors and what they are doing and portraying. And it's almost like being hijacked by that particular archetype, and it shows up in the astrology. And so that's what we're here about. We're having fun. This is for entertainment purposes, of course, but a lot could be said for the astrology that we're going to see. Okay, what else do I want to share? Now, astrology is very complex, and it is something that you get awakened to it. And I think it's really kind of significant that I didn't have Nicola's Coughlan's chart data in terms of when her rising sign is, because that's like the rising sign is the time of birth. And we didn't have a time of birth, but she did release in one of her interviews her actually 3, her triad, which is basically her rising sign, her sun, and her moon. So she gave us that she's an Aquarius rising, and that she was a Taurus moon, and that she is a sun in Capricorn. She kind of started off in the interview with Tadum, I think it was Tadum, that she was a Capricorn. And so then she kind of said something about David Bowie and someone else that, oh, they're also Capricorn, so it must be cool, right? Anyway, so we got the information about her rising sign a little bit later than, in May. So it didn't come out until I think a few weeks later, where she had shared that in an interview. And then in another interview that I think was done in Toronto or something, by BuzzFeed, they were sharing at the end of that exclusive TikTok video, Luke's information. But it got scrambled a bit when she was trying to recall it. They've been traveling a lot. I would probably forget things too. But what I thought was really interesting about that share of information was that they were looking at the charts when they were in Australia. So, which is kind of like the beginning of some of the press. So I have somewhere in my notes, I have mega notes here. But anyway, I thought that was interesting, that he was actually being invited by Nicola to actually look at his chart, and they landed on his Leo rising. Now, I was messing around trying to figure out on the whole 24 hours of a day what his birth rising sign might be. I was close, but it's like, okay, with the rising sign in Leo, there's a complementary opposite thing going on with Aquarius, which is Nicola's chart. So that got me excited. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, now I want to see where Psyche, the asteroid Psyche, is, the asteroid Eros, and also, I also looked at Amor and Cupido. And so these are the 4 that I wanted to take a look at, not only with Nicola, not only with Luke, but also Netflix and some of the other events that went down recently that kind of like, Oh, that's a disruption. What happened there? Anyway, so hopefully this is a little bit of information to get started. What else? I will also in the notes of this video put a couple of videos that I really appreciate and I really like about how they share and kind of retell the myth of Eros and Psyche. So you can take a look at that. I actually encourage it, like actually watch those and then you'll maybe pick up on a lot more here. Now, if you're familiar with astrology, you might have some very, very basic. I can go super deep, so hopefully I don't lose you. Don't worry. I will try to keep it as simple as possible because astrology can get very, very technical and deep really quick. Okay. And I tend to do that. So what else do I want to share? Oh, I want to share how another thing that picked up on the imagery that was happening, all the swans. The swans are a symbol that are on the carriage or of Aphrodite. Yeah. And also, so when I see the swans, I was thinking Aphrodite. But Aphrodite, has the tasks for Psyche. So I think this is very interesting. So when I look at the chart, I also want to look at Venus. So, but the swans have been so, so embedded in Nicola's stuff, but now I'm seeing it in Luke's and I'm also seeing it in Antonia's. Anyway, just a tiny bit on that one. And also the swans, an event that happened on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. I'll go into that a little bit later. But okay, so the swans are very important because the imagery is almost, when we see that in our world, in the third dimension, it's almost like this precursor of, hello, wake up, pay attention. This is important because we have some symbolism here. And, but not everybody catches that, but I do. Anyway, so, okay, so I'm going to jump into a slide presentation and then I'm going to go away from a video from on my face. But I wanted to kind of give that as a precursor. Okay, so let me share my screen and get to my slide deck. So, of course, this is going to be a presentation on Eros and Psyche and the myth with a contemporary theater. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this. And if you have any questions or your own thoughts, please share your comments. I would be very interested to get your thoughts on what I share. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Back onto the slide. There we go. So, of course, we have the actors. We have, of course, Eros and Psyche. Beautiful statue. Love that. And then we have Colin and Penelope, which are the parts that they play in the Bridgerton series. And of course, this is their year that they were, season 3 was their year to glow up, as they talk about that on the Bridgerton series. And of course, Pen is her nickname. And then Luke and Nicola are the actors. And of course, he calls her Nick. So there you go. I think this is an image I took from the Netflix actual series and I just screenshot. I think this is the moon ball or something. All right, here we go. So, and there's my little images that I did together of them when they first started on the show. And that was back in 2019 when they met in the summer. And of course, the swans are important. So I put that in that as well. And then, of course, kind of the most recent event in London when they did the part 2 premiere image there down in the left-hand corner. And then this is kind of a striking image of Penelope in a very significant moment in the film or in the series. And then, of course, when they're in promenade. I love her outfit. That's so pretty. Anyway, here we go. So Nicola. Okay, so here's Nicola's chart. And I have highlighted with the yellow arrows some things I want to point out along the way. Now, a lot of people don't know the symbols, but maybe they do. I think a lot of millennials know their charts, which I love. But if you're brand new to astrology, I'll try to describe things along the way. And I will annotate with a little highlighter. So we'll do that so we can follow along. And we'll make sure we get this color. I like pink. No, actually, we'll go with a beautiful green because that's the color. Okay, actually, where do I want? Where's this? I need this. I'll just keep it. Okay, so first I like to look at the ascendant, of course. And of course, I'm still working on the rectification to find out if that ascendant sits down here or higher up in the Aquarius sign or in the earlier degrees. So here is her ascendant. And that is so, so important because it sets the structure of the houses of all the areas of life. And we'll talk about other things along the way. But I want to point out that's very important. It sets the angles. But without an exact time, I'm using what we call whole sign houses. So a sign equals a house. That's a system that's nice to use when you don't have exact, but it's good enough with just the rising sign. And you can get a lot of detail. So now that we know the rising sign, then we have her sun nicely tucked into the 12th house. She has her sun in Capricorn, and then her moon is down here in the 4th house, and that's in Taurus. She has an exalted moon in the 4th house. She has very strong family roots. She is stable, and this moon is connected to her work and what she's in service to, 6th house. Now, I am both an evolutionary astrologer and I'm a traditional astrologer trained. And so I can speak to I will overlap between the two. But from the 6th house in evolutionary astrology, we look at that as a house of what you're in service to, what you're going to bring to the world. So there's something about kind of feeding the world and nurturing that, and about that foundation and that peace or that stability, but also the beauty. It's so much beauty. So she's bringing beauty and goodness, right? How many people are talking about her I almost feel like there's a strong projection around what they're experiencing and feeling when they're looking at Nicola is her beauty. And they kind of have also called her a goddess. So there you go. But also I want to point out the positions of certain things outside of those three, the sun, ascendant, and the moon. In evolutionary astrology, I really kind of hone in on where are the nodes of the moon. This is like the arc of life. This is the south node right here in Libra at 16 degrees, and that's in Libra in the 9th house. So that's very much like travel, higher education, or higher learning. Now, she definitely has traveled, right? I don't know. She's definitely done some education in some of the acting stuff that she's noted in her Wikipedia or in other interviews that she's done for magazines and things like that I've read. I can't remember the name of them, but I think one of them was Oxford, and then a different Oxford, and then also Birmingham something. I can't remember. Anyway, both were like related to the arts and acting. So she did get a higher education and to pursue her dream of acting. But it would take a long time to mature. And why would that be? Well, the Venus is here in the 11th house, and it is responsible for this south node. It rules the Libra, right? And Venus is in the house of friends. It's also in the house of good fortune from a traditional astrology standpoint. And it's right. I don't know how much that midheaven moves by the time of birth. Probably not that much, but it's pretty close to the midheaven, right? Like pretty strong there. So she's definitely going to have some visibility. But Saturn is also in this detail of Sagittarius in her 11th house. So it's important to point out that it may take time. And sure enough, it did. But she did have a breakout when she was 10 years old. She was in a movie, My Brother's War or something like that. She was the girl feeding the swans. And I thought that was really significant because that's the first kind of thing that she would have in her career. And it's almost like, like an image of what's to come. And because it emerges later. The swans were so significant that she's the girl feeding swans. I love that. And that was back in 1997. Okay. And then we have some other things going on. We have a stellium. She has so much fire and so much fire with Aries. She has Mars in Aries. This Nicola has so many planets that are in really good position in terms of being in their domain, and from an astrology standpoint for how things manifest in life by where you put your will or act on something, it's going to manifest something. Sometimes it takes time though, right? So her Mars in Aries is very strong in the 3rd house, and the 3rd house is kind of the detail around, communication, how you perceive things. And this is her humor. It's kind of her wit, her humor. 3rd house is also siblings. So it can speak to her siblings that she has, right? And also she has Jupiter in Pisces, and that is conjunct Eros, right there. And so that is significant because of the whole theme that's part of her season, right? I can't keep my highlighter for some reason. Okay. So here's the Jupiter. Jupiter is actually in its domain in Pisces. Jupiter rules not only the Pisces, but also that whole stellium in her. So her Jupiter absolutely is going to bring her wealth, but it will take time. It did take time, right? So it's always important to kind of look where Saturn is, because that tells you where the thing will take time, right? And so Jupiter, even though its domain is Pisces, and she did a lot of voice acting, if you look at her history, and of course that kind of gives the third house, and she was behind the scenes, kind of not visible, right? But over time, that sun will arc. Okay. And we'll talk about that later, but I want to kind of point that out. Now, the North Node is where she is leaning for her own soul growth. That is to be courageous, to be pioneering, to boldly act on her free will. And communicate. And Mars is in there. So you know that that's going to take place. The tricky thing is she will also stub her toe on anything Mars that is not, there will be, kind of lessons around, okay, how am I going to use my Mars? Because Mars is a tricky planet in terms of if you're born in the day, which she is because the sun is above the horizon, that Mars, from a traditional astrology standpoint, will have kind of difficult passages. But in time, you get to know yourself. You'll understand, and what I think in one of the interviews, she said something about her mom kind of scolding her at sometimes about saying things inappropriately. That's that Mars, right? But also her Mars, when it is in kind of giving a positive like action on her free will, is a combination of her Saturn, because it took discipline to do this, and using her Mars to like use it, do it, use it, just do it. That's a slogan, right? When she would practice accents, and that would actually be something that she is coming to be known for, that she can pick up on accents really quickly and change her characters that she's portraying on stage, or in the case of Bridgerton's Penelope. So her Mars is kind of like that's an action when she puts that on display. Okay. Also, we have Mercury. Mercury is a very important planet because it is part of the thinking, speaking, communicating, all of that. But it is important for her because it's a part of the fifth house of creativity. And fifth house, if children are a part of the picture, that would be kind of how that would look. But she's using it in her art and how she is creative and creates characters and gets their whole profile. She just dives right in. But I think in one of the interviews, she talks about how she has to find their voice first and then they take shape. So I found that very interesting about her. So the Mercury at work has a very strong logical, chronological in her consciousness. Okay. But what's important to point out is there's also a wound here, kind of like what the wound would be kind of more like a wounded healer. So from things not, this is like a Chiron is the placement, the asteroid Chiron. When we have that as a return when we're 50 years old. So it's kind of this underlying theme throughout life. And think about how she was criticized, maybe for how she speaks or how she interrupts or whatever on some things. But it also is the thing when she leans into it, she can actually give that freedom to speak or think logically about things. So there's kind of a challenge with that. Sometimes we can't heal the very thing that we actually are giving someone else, right? There's a very important thing. So Chiron's in her fifth house. But what's interesting to me is that it's in the element of air. It's in Gemini, and her rising sign, this is where you got to pay attention to the elements, is and kind of like helping in a way figure out her identity in this world, right? Like her Uranian energy, her Aquarian energy. And that's also Saturn. So Saturn is a co-ruler of Aquarius with Uranus from an evolutionary standpoint. And then up here we have the South Node. So there's like this trine of air, and we get a lot of things happening within that trine. Even though there's no planets per se, except for the asteroid Chiron, it's like how it's in the consciousness and how it breathes out through the friends, through working in groups, large groups like her ensemble casts. And also her career will has that embedded in it because of Mars ruling Scorpio. Okay. So the communication stuff. Communication is such a huge thing for her, but it's also kind of what people are attracted. It's like a magnet. So I think those are the things I want to point out on Nicola's chart in terms of just kind of some basics to kind of lay some groundwork. Another thing I want to point out is her Eros is here at 16 of Pisces, conjunct her Jupiter in Pisces, which makes it magnified. It's going to be something really significant in her, especially in her Jupiter cycles, but just in life around values and what her self-worth, her self-confidence. It takes time. But again, notice that it is opposite up here. We have Psyche. So we have an opposition of Psyche at 17 degrees of Virgo, opposite her Jupiter Eros conjunction in Pisces. So what we have here is an opposition that's really magnified by Jupiter. So that really is enhanced when she does anything collectively with friends or with her ensemble, her groups of her casts. And so that really shows up in Dairy Girls, and that really shows up in Bridgerton. And I think it's also showing up in other pieces that she's done, but I haven't dove into them, so I can't speak to them specifically yet. So I want to, her career is actually Scorpio from a 10th house perspective, but you can see that the midheaven is way over here in the 11th from traditional astrology standpoint. So when I have a birth time, I will be able to look at a quadrant chart system, which is Placidus, which will give you kind of a different perspective of the 10th house, and you can have like another lens of astrology. Okay. But from a traditional standpoint, we have Scorpio on in the 10th house, and we have Pluto in Scorpio, which magnifies the sexy taboo parts, the depth of psyche that we go with Pluto in Scorpio. So she will have this range within her career. And with her Mars in the 3rd house, it's at an inconjunct. So by 10th house to 3rd house, they're not opposite, they're like inconjunct. So they're kind of a little bit in the blind spot. So she might not always make connections on some things where the collective may, right? So I think that's important to kind of take into consideration. Now, evolutionary astrology definitely puts Pluto and Mars as co-rulers of Scorpio. And so you can take it from that angle, but there will be like a transformation in the career that has a lot going on within the depths of a death and rebirth kind of transformation process. So we got a little bit of that in Bridgerton. So we saw her from series 1 and series 2, how she kind of emerged from that, and then series 3 kind of gets the glow up, right? So there's that kind of birthing. We see that kind of transformation that she takes on that in that series. I do believe Big Mood has dives into psychological, mental, wellness kind of subject material. And so I think that's also significant. And I also want to point out that the Jupiter in Pisces is trine by element sign. When you have a water and a water, that is an intensification of kind of like how that might play out. So we have the intensification of Eros coming out through the career, right? Because it can flow easily through that transformation. What else do I want to point out? Okay, back to Psyche and Eros. Psyche and Eros, when I was thinking about Nicola, I was thinking about her Psyche being in the 8th house. The 8th house is also the partner's values. This is like shared values. But from Nicola's point of view, this is a blind spot, right? This is like you have in astrology what we call blind spots, and those are from the person. So Nicola is the Aquarian, 1st house rising sign Aquarius, and then when it's in the 8th house, it's a blind spot. 6th house is also a bit of a blind spot, and then 12th is a blind spot, but you can also have 2nd be a blind spot. Okay, but it's called aversion, but we will go into those technical terms later. What I want to point out is that this is something that she only might be able to get an idea about it by through astrology as she dove into it. But Psyche and Eros aren't something that's in the first view that you might get from you pulling up your first chart. You have to dive in to learn where to find. You can get them on astro.com. You go and put them in. I can do another video on that later. But what's important is when you dive into this, if you know that archetype is kind of very visible, you kind of want to go, oh, why is that popping up? Then you can plug it in and see kind of what's present. But for Nicola, embedded in her, birth chart, we have Psyche in the 8th house and in Virgo. And so in Virgo, it's like in the myth, Psyche being sent by Aphrodite to do all these tasks. And then one of the first one is to go sort the seeds and to do them in one night, a massive pile of seeds on the floor, and to sort all the seeds. And that is very Virgo, okay? The meticulous detail that goes into it. And I cannot help but think that it's like a part of the consciousness going through little details to kind of get to that, to start understanding the self in all these facets. But the Psyche is also opposite Eros. So there's this massive separation. This is like Psyche, doing those tasks after she's separated from Eros, right? Like there's this huge separation. So when I see this opposition, that's separation. So that's, infant Nicola, and how that's in the consciousness. And so it has to work itself out. So it's kind of interesting to see the emergence when she's, interested in acting. And then the first thing she gets paid, first acting that she gets paid for, non-credited, but paid for, was when she was the little girl feeding the swans. And she was 10 years old, right? So I cannot help but think about how Aphrodite is just hanging out as a part of a bigger storyline in her life, and how that emerges. So I just find that fascinating. Anyway, so I think this is very, very important. Another thing that I want to point out is I noticed when I was looking at Nicola's chart, the 16s. So 16 of Chiron, 16 for the moon in Taurus, 16 for her north node and her south node, 16 for Eros, 16 for Mercury, which is the ruler of not only Chiron's Gemini, but also the Virgo. And then I thought I saw another one, 16 for Saturn and 16 for Pallas. So there was just like 16 all of her charts. Like, wow. And then to know that the release date for Bridgerton's season 3, part 1, was May 16th. I was just like, okay, hello. Anyway, now Psyche is retrograde in her chart. Now, I'd have to do a little homework. I haven't pulled the charts to figure out when that will by progression go direct, but it's pretty important. We'll look at that later. But the lay of the land here is excuse me, that Venus is very important because it's kind of symbolic of Aphrodite, okay? And Venus is the Roman, Aphrodite, Greek, okay? Psyche, Greek, Eros, Greek. Cupid is here in Capricorn. And I think it's interesting that it's pretty close to her sun at 23 degrees, almost 24, and her sun is at 18.5. So Cupid is in the unconscious, kind of behind the ascendant there in the 12th house. So definitely a part of that mix. And what is interesting is that her sun is trine, earth to earth. So easy flow and earth. She said this is the trine. You see these blue triangles in the middle of here of the aspects. And then the moon is trine the Psyche, trine the sun. So this is a huge flow of bringing it down to earth and being grounded in something. Capricorn, it rises over time. It rises through milestone after milestone after milestone. It is the worker, right? It's got a destination, it's got a destiny, but it does it from its own determination to get there. Psyche is something about our own psyche, but there's the element of our own, but our connection to something bigger than us, and what that concept of the human psyche is with that whole myth. You kind of have to loosely look into a myth, and I think it's good to do maybe collages with art to kind of get where these themes are. I learned that through Jason Hawley, another astrologer, but I think we definitely have it in the art that Nicola is portraying and acting. Okay, so Psyche in the 8th house, we'll get into the subject of vulnerability It will get into the values of the shared values, but it's also kind of taboo subjects. Interesting. Taboo subjects around sex, around, how we value certain things, right? So there's a little bit of that. Eighth house is also important kind of in terms of the others' shared values. So if seventh house is others that reflect back a mirror to Nicola, then this is not only a significant co-star, but this is also significant people. This is also the audience who perceives her and projects. There's these projections back and forth, right? And these are the values of that audience, the other, right? So she's picking up and giving us something through her art, and then we are perceiving it in our own consciousness, and it's lighting us up like Christmas trees. Or those who are part of the Bridgerton fandom. Okay, so I think that's important. Now, also, I love that her lot of fortune, power of fortune, is in Taurus. And this is really significant because presently Uranus is cracking that puppy wide open for us all in terms of beauty, what we think of beauty. But this is like a part of fortune. The lot of fortune is very, it happens to you and for you. And it's not something that you really control. Okay. Just similar to Uranus, and the fact that Uranus is involved. Uranus is the planet of liberation. It is the planet of the just kind of like sudden events. It's kind of like exacting precision. We astrologers love to use Uranus when they're trying to exact a chart, kind of figure out when things hit the angles. It's a great planet to use for that. But what I think is interesting is that Uranus by transit is right on Nicola's lot of fortune. So it's really activating beauty, what we think is beautiful, and kind of cracking that wide open for us, right? So I just love that. Anyway, so what else can I give you on Nicola's chart? Oh, I also pulled the asteroid Amor, if I said that right. And it's at 19 degrees Aquarius, right in her first house. And so this is kind of like another enhanced point that we will also see connected to Luke's chart a bit. Okay. So if I really truly believe that Nicola's ascendant is probably within the first 2 or 3 degrees, I think it's probably within the first 2, to be honest, because I think it's both acting on Nicola's and Luke's. Now, I could be wrong because we don't have the exact birth times, but those ascendants, if they are within the first 2-3 degrees of Aquarius for Nicola and Leo for Luke, then there would be a huge mirroring dynamic going down, and also connecting to that moment that Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct in 2020 in December. So huge. This is so huge. Another thing I want to point out is that within Nicola's chart, we have a mutable grand cross connected to Psyche. So I'm just going to draw a line because you can see the Saturn. Saturn is very, very important. And we go all the way down here to Chiron. And then we take the Eros and Jupiter in Pisces and we go up to Psyche. So you can see we have this mutable cross. This is significant because it's kind of like a fluid, like it's almost like Pilates over many, many, many years, like the fluidity that has to happen to emerge. And I think it takes the process, to turn through many cycles to build the spiritual muscle that's going to be around these themes. And for Nicola, it will be friends. That's her 11th house of friends. That's Saturn in time. That's really important. And Saturn is the thing that we're mastering. So her career will take her to many foreign lands. Absolutely. Sagittarius, gonna be traveling. And also it would bring her wealth because it sits in her second house. But it's kind of like Pisces, the imagination, the collective unconscious. Pisces is also when it's maybe a more negative expression is escapism, too much substances. You know what I'm saying? So I would say I wouldn't want to be a person that imbibes too much with this combination. And then with these are all getting activated. So her role as a healer, as some have, I think Anna has mentioned this, is it's in there. But sometimes when we have the thing that we have to heal, we can still struggle with it. But when we act as if and take courage and go boldly into that thing that we desire, that we want to do and express ourselves, it starts helping other people. So when they are observing or being made aware of it. So this, through her work and what she believes in and stands for, kind of gets pulled through that. It's called a mutable ground cross in her chart. Now, this is just her natal chart. This is a static moment in time. And I think it's important to point out that it is going to express by the turn of time as things move by transits, as the planets move by transit, as the planets move by progression. And that's progressions are basically a way of looking at another slice of time for each day after someone's born, the planets, had moved, right? So we look at progressions for kind of like another perspective, very kind of spiritual perspective. But again, that's a complex thing. So I am coming up, I think, 50 minutes almost with this one. So I want to maybe end this portion here in just a few minutes to then maybe dive into the other one. So I'm probably going to have this sliced up because it gets very in depth. What else do I want to point out? That I also think it's important that Nicola was born with Neptune Capricorn. She's not quite the Uranus Neptune in Capricorn conjunction like some other younger millennials, but she was born in 87, so she's kind of an older millennial at age 37. But I think what's important here is that Neptune, because they're such big planets, outer planets they're transpersonal planets. We do not control these things. We are either swept up in something or we're acting, we are in something that's bigger, like a soul group is acting on something, right? And bringing it to the collective whole. And the Neptune in Capricorn is so in the imagination, the imaginary realm brought down to earth through the works, right? Through making something concrete in third dimension. And when I think about Capricorn, I think of things that are made real through action over milestone, right? And when Neptune's involved, there's a little bit of it's kind of hitching on something from a much bigger place, realm, and bringing it in. Right? But it takes time. And to have her Saturn kind of also symbolically be close to that with Saturn in Sagittarius, over time, there is kind of an appreciation for things world, foreign, friends. From hers is going to be much in the friend realm, but Saturn is about responsibility, about borders and how we act with others in foreign places. But so her father, when we sometimes look at Saturn as symbolic of the father in someone's chart, Saturn, her father was, what his line of work was around the, in certain places in the Middle East, and where that took them, so that's kind of interesting, and how they returned to Ireland, and which is interesting because Nicola's moon so strong in Taurus. There's something very grounding about her being born after her family had made all those travels because of her father's work. Also, when her Saturn returned, approximately, I think she was 27. If I'm not mistaken. What was that date when she was Dairy Girls? Dairy Girls was casting at the end of 2016 and into 2017. And I'm not sure exactly when she landed that role as one of the main characters in the ensemble, but that date, as far as I know from her interviews with magazines and things like that, she had mentioned that her dad didn't even know about her success. So in 2017, in January, she would have turned 30. So it would have been at the tail end of her kind of Saturn return, was kind of finishing, because when you hit 30, it's like, okay, it's real. But it's really, the Saturn return really finishes when it finishes that sign and moves into the next sign. And interesting, that's when she was cast in Dairy Girls. And her father passed away 5 days before she landed the gig with Dairy Girls. So it was so she could have landed the gig in late 2016, like sometime between like November, December timeframe, or maybe she did land it right around that time. It could have been that she got called back later, because I understand there was a really long process for her to get Dairy Girls, which then led to her getting Bridgerton. But what I think is important is that the Saturn return was really super significant, and it would have been kind of like this marker of sadness and grief, you know, at the beginning of her career, and then to have the success she has now, that he would have not known about that, you know? So that's in her chart, okay? And there's also an interesting mirror with Luke, and I'll go into his story next. Okay, so I think I have covered quite a few things that embedded in Nicola's natal chart. We've only done natal. We haven't even got into transits or progressions or anything, which we will do. But what I think is important is Venus is such an important planet. Aphrodite and Venus, very important here. And then Psyche, and how Psyche will be such a significant thing in Nicola's life. This Eros and Psyche, and how that crosses with her Saturn and Chiron. Healer, wounded healer, what she's mastering, what she brings to master, but she's definitely got the toolbox. She's got Jupiter in Pisces. She's got Mars in Aries. She's got a moon, the solid grounding, the groundedness of the moon in Taurus, and that will help her as she strives to become what she's becoming. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this part. I don't think I have anything else I want to kind of call out at this time other than that. If you want more information about kind of what each house means, I will share very briefly, because I want to kind of more focus on the actor and how Eros and Psyche is in their chart, and then a little bit of Cupido and a little bit of Amor, just kind of see where they sit, because I want to kind of lay the groundwork. And when I focus on events, you're going to see how this kind of looks in 2024, and also Luke's chart, and then we'll also look at events for him. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much, and until the next video. You can find me at onesagesview.com, and if you're interested in a reading, you can always book me through my website, onesagesview.com. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.